Hi everyone, it's Sammy here. In this video I'm taking a look at compression, but really dynamic control. We'll take a look at a compressor briefly, but I'm actually going to look at some other techniques for controlling the dynamics of your kick and some top loops, for example. Now, I don't actually use compressors for sidechain compression anymore. Most of the time I just use a sidechain plugin. And it got me thinking, well, could I not do something similar when it comes to controlling things like the kick, top loops, and things like that as well. So before we get to that, let's take a look at why we use compression at all. So I'm going to disable this compressor and we're going to listen just to the kick drum here. Now for me, I like the transient, but the body here is sort of too heavy and I don't really like the ratio. Now I could throw it away and grab another sample from the library, but I find that no matter how meticulous I am with choosing a kick drum, at some point when I'm mixing or working on a bit of music, I have to change or adjust it to some degree. And I've really struggled with kick drums, getting them to sit properly in the mix. I've tried, different compressors, spent a lot of time tweaking the settings, and I found that ultimately, I get lucky sometimes, but there's always been something missing. And I think what it is the precision. There's just not quite the precision in using a compressor with attack, release, ratio settings, as I'm used to, say, for example, with synthesizers, where I have a lot more fine, detailed, reliable, and consistent timing settings with the ADSR envelopes and other things. Now, using compressors definitely can work. Let's take a listen to example what it does to the kick. This is a pretty heavy-handed setting, but it's created this large spike here. So we've accentuated that transient a lot, so we've got a really nice click, and we've reduced the body. This is important because if I was to push this limiter, so I'm getting to about 3 dB, but that's very, very short, so we're still hearing that click, but it's being limited and it's not really distorting, or at least not very much. If I take this off, so you see this extra room that's being taken up by the body of the kick is actually going to eat up a lot of headroom later on. All right, so compression's great. Let's add in a top loop here. And you listen to this loop for a little while, you'll get used to the energy, and then when I turn the compressor off, it'll sound really, it won't sound, well, nearly as glued together. Okay, great. So we've taken a look at what compression can do, but I want to talk about a couple of different methods now. I'm going to turn this off and I'm going to actually go in and I want to actually shape this kick directly. Okay, so we can actually do that with volume control right here in the clip, but I'm going to bring in the utility plugin instead. That way I can turn it off and on and I'm not affecting my mixer track. Because if I did that, the mixer fader would be going up and down constantly, and that'd be really kind of weird. Typically, I do all of my mixing duties with the utility anyway. That way, I'm not messing around with the fader, and if I need to make some final adjustments to the fader, I can do that. And the utility plugins are there for like gain staging and other things. So let's go in and we're going to configure this now. So let's get rid of that. I'm only using this small section so I can get away with just making the adjustments, this one bit right here. It's just going to loop. So what do I want? I want a stronger transient and I want to reduce the body, and I'm going to have it end pretty much here. Now it's going to end up sounding very short and punchy, and what I like to do is experiment with bringing in my own sub to fill it out. So a nice clean sine wave, for example. That way you can mix it in. Let's take a listen to what we've got now. And what we've got here is you've got this point right at the beginning of the sample, but because it's looping and it ends here at 0, that first transient, the first time you play it, it sounds right, and then as it loops, it doesn't sound right. So all you got to do to fix that is make sure this is brought up. All right, sounding good. Let's turn that off. So it's really nice control. It sounds very clean. We can make this a little bit more drastic. Let's see how far we can push that. So that's not bad at all. That's about 3 dB, and it's not really distorting very much at all. So that's pretty good. And it's very, very tight. So if we put that in now with the mix, with the drum loop, we'll turn that off. And we could be a little less heavy-handed with it and bring back in the sub bass here, but again, not in this video, but in another video, we can look at adding in your own clean sub. Alright, now the other thing we can do is actually work in a detailed way with the shape on this drum loop here as well to kind of make it mesh together with the kick. So like sidechain compression, but you get some really nice fine control. So for this, I'm actually going to create an unlinked loop here because I only really want to work with half a bar. Because I don't want to have to go and repeat the shapes all over the whole 4 bars of this sample. So I'm going to turn off snap and make sure it's turned off. And I'm first going to concentrate here on the clap. So I'm going to bring in the sort of sidechain, as it were, a little bit early. Let's bring that back up over here. I keep pressing the wrong button. There. So you can see how you can really fine-tune how heavy the sidechaining sounds or how light it sounds. And this is a lot like using a compressor on the drum bus and playing around with the settings, except it's really clean and you're only affecting one area at a time. Now typically when you start laying into a compressor pretty hard, it's going to bring up all the areas between the kick. So the shakers and the hi-hats in this section. You know, personally, when it comes to this sample, but with most samples, I find the hi-hats are a little too much. So I'm just going to draw them out here. And I'm also going to bring in sidechaining at the kick. Okay, that works for me. We can actually turn it up a little bit now. So, very tight sound. Let's turn this off and this off. Much like when you use actual compression, you have to compensate by raising the overall volume. But I think we've got a really nice punchy sound, and we don't have to deal with, the attack and release maybe not behaving the way we want all throughout our 1-bar loop. We can actually now still use master bus compression, but we can use a very gentle setting, and we can focus on, a little bit more glue, a little bit more groove. So, oops, I got the threshold the wrong way around. Now, where I think this really shines is when you start comparing it when you've got other elements in. Here I've only got a simple ARP. But the tight control leaves so much extra room, I feel, if you take a listen now. See, one of the problems with mixing, it's not so much about levels necessarily, it's kind of about attention. And when you have very short sounds, they can be loud because they're taking your attention, but only very briefly. Well, you can also say they're taking up that room in the mix very briefly. So when you have a tighter sound, you can get away with pushing them, making them very upfront, but still having a lot of space for other things. Instantly, this is no longer being drowned out. So I like that a lot. We can also use it for conventional sidechaining. And I mean, you can do this with a plugin, but if you've got it right here in Ableton, you can also draw it in. This gives you the chance to experiment a little bit with the shapes. So again, I'm going to do unlinked. We're going to go down to half a bar. So we can choose whether we want to do very fast, sort of almost more invisible sidechaining. Or we can extend it out a little bit. Now I like the way it sounds with sort of an asymmetric pattern here. Kind of like the addition of the clap causes an even deeper sidechain. And it doesn't have to be exact here either. I mean, it helps a little bit to keep it in time. But we can move this around. And I do wonder if this would sound any different if we were slightly early again. That'll do for now. So that's my tip today for dynamic control. Give it a try. Honestly, I think it's worth trying out, especially on top loops. There's a lot of things you can cut out to make your loops a little more focused, to work with the rest of your track. But if you have kick issues where you like the transient, but you're finding it's just too heavy in your track and it's eating up too much headroom, go ahead and try a shaper plugin or just put on utility and draw in the curve yourself. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care and stay safe.